In this episode, we focus on a decision that shapes how an organization thinks about compliance for years at a time: choosing the right compliance frameworks. A framework is a structured way to organize controls, responsibilities, and evidence so that security and privacy expectations can be met consistently and explained clearly to auditors, regulators, customers, and internal leaders. Beginners often hear the word framework and imagine a long checklist, but the real purpose is to provide a common language for risk and control, so the organization is not improvising its compliance story each time someone asks questions. The challenge is that frameworks are not one-size-fits-all, and selecting the wrong one can create unnecessary burden, miss important obligations, or encourage paper compliance that looks good but fails to reduce real risk. Selecting the right one means understanding the business, understanding regulatory triggers, and then evaluating frameworks as tools that support both protection and evidence. The goal is not to collect frameworks like trophies. It is to choose frameworks that fit the organization's reality, scale, and expectations. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good starting point is recognizing that frameworks exist for different purposes, and you must be clear about what problem you are solving before you choose. Some frameworks are designed primarily for risk management, helping organizations identify risks and align controls to risk appetite. Others are designed for security management systems, emphasizing governance, continuous improvement, and evidence of control operation over time. Some frameworks are more technical and control-focused, providing detailed control catalogs that can be mapped directly to security practices. Others are industry-specific, reflecting regulatory expectations or common audit patterns in a particular sector. A beginner mistake is choosing a framework because it is popular or because someone in leadership has heard the name, without understanding whether it fits the organization's needs. Another mistake is choosing a framework that is too heavy for the organization's size and maturity, which can lead to compliance fatigue and shortcuts. The right choice begins with purpose, because purpose defines what fit means. When the organization knows whether it needs risk structure, audit readiness, management system discipline, or customer assurance, selection becomes more rational. Evaluating fit also requires understanding the organization's regulatory and contractual landscape, because frameworks often serve as ways to demonstrate compliance to external stakeholders. In some situations, a regulator or customer expects a particular framework or a particular certification, and that expectation can shape the choice strongly. In other situations, there is flexibility, and the organization can choose a framework that best aligns with its operations while still meeting obligations. A practical approach is to list the major obligations and then ask what type of evidence must be produced, such as policies, risk assessments, control tests, access reviews, incident response records, and vendor oversight documentation. Beginners should understand that the compliance burden often comes from evidence requirements, not just from implementing controls. A framework that provides clear guidance on evidence can reduce confusion and reduce audit disruption. When you evaluate frameworks, you are evaluating whether they help you meet both control expectations and proof expectations in a sustainable way. Business fit is just as important as regulatory fit, because a framework that is misaligned with how the business operates will either be ignored or will damage productivity. Different businesses have different risk profiles, different delivery models, and different tolerance for process overhead. A small organization delivering a single product may need a simpler framework that emphasizes core controls and clear evidence, while a large organization with many services and many vendors may need a more structured framework that supports consistent governance across departments. Businesses that change rapidly, such as those releasing new features frequently, need frameworks that can integrate with change without freezing innovation. Businesses that operate critical services may need more rigorous control testing and stronger operational discipline. For beginners, the key idea is that frameworks are not only about security ideals, they are about organizational behavior. The best framework is the one that teams can actually follow, because compliance that cannot be executed reliably is not compliance in reality. A central concept in framework selection is the difference between a framework as a reference and a framework as the program's backbone. Many organizations use more than one framework, but they often choose one as the primary structure and then map other requirements to it. This approach can reduce duplication and avoid creating separate compliance programs for every obligation. For example, a primary framework can define control domains, ownership, and evidence processes, while mappings show how those controls satisfy multiple standards or regulatory expectations. Beginners sometimes assume that using multiple frameworks means doing everything twice, but with good mapping, one set of controls and evidence can support many requirements. The key is to choose a backbone that is stable and scalable, because it becomes the structure that teams learn and auditors recognize. When the backbone is chosen poorly, mappings become complex and confusing, and the organization ends up managing a messy web of compliance demands. Selecting the backbone is therefore one of the most consequential compliance strategy decisions. Another important evaluation factor is specificity, meaning how detailed the framework is and how that detail affects implementation. Highly detailed control catalogs can be useful because they reduce ambiguity, but they can also be overwhelming and may encourage checkbox behavior if teams treat each control as a form to complete rather than a practice to operate. Less detailed frameworks can be flexible and easier to adapt, but they may require more interpretation, which can lead to inconsistency across teams. Beginners often assume more detail is always better, but the right amount of detail depends on the organization's maturity and the consistency of its processes. If the organization struggles with basic control discipline, a more structured framework may help by providing clear expectations. If the organization has strong internal practices, a less prescriptive framework may allow more tailoring without losing control. Evaluating specificity includes considering how the framework will be taught, how it will be operationalized, and how it will be audited. The best fit is the one that provides enough clarity without creating unnecessary bureaucracy. Evidence and measurement expectations are another crucial part of selecting a framework because compliance is judged by what can be demonstrated. Some frameworks emphasize continuous monitoring, regular internal assessment, and management review, which can strengthen long-term readiness but require sustained effort and coordination. Others emphasize periodic certification or attestation cycles, which can create predictable audit rhythms but can also encourage last-minute evidence gathering if governance is weak. A framework that fits the organization helps build evidence into daily operations so compliance becomes routine rather than a scramble. Beginners should understand that evidence is not only documents. Evidence includes repeatable processes, records of decisions, and proof that controls function. Framework selection should consider how evidence is collected, how it is stored, and how it is reviewed, because these operational details determine whether compliance is sustainable. A framework that demands evidence practices the organization cannot maintain will create compliance stress and increased risk. Fit, therefore, includes the organization's ability to produce and maintain the required proof over time. Framework selection also involves thinking about integration with existing processes, because the organization already has habits and workflows that cannot be replaced overnight. A framework that integrates well can use existing practices like change management, access management, incident response, and vendor management as evidence of control operation. A framework that conflicts with existing processes may require significant redesign, which can be valuable but also costly and disruptive. For beginners, the key is to see integration as a risk reduction tool. When frameworks align with how work is done, controls are more likely to be followed and evidence is more likely to be accurate. When frameworks fight the workflow, people invent shortcuts and compliance becomes theatrical. This is why selecting a framework is also a change management decision. You are choosing not only a set of control ideas, but a model for how the organization will behave and how it will prove that behavior to others. A mature selection process also acknowledges that frameworks can be used at different levels, and not every part must be implemented at once. Some organizations choose a framework and then build capability in stages, focusing first on the highest risk areas and then expanding coverage. This can be a responsible approach when it is transparent and when interim controls reduce risk while the program matures. The danger is using staging as an excuse for indefinite delay, which leaves obligations unmet and creates false confidence. Advising on selection means describing not only which framework fits, but also how the organization will adopt it realistically, including what resources are needed and what trade-offs will appear. Beginners should learn that a framework does not automatically create compliance. It creates a structure that must be filled with real controls, real ownership, and real evidence. Selecting a framework is the start of a discipline, not the end of a decision. Finally, selecting frameworks that fit business and regulation requires clarity about how success will be measured. Success may include reduced audit findings, improved evidence readiness, more consistent control operation, faster remediation of gaps, and increased trust from customers and partners. It may also include improved risk outcomes, like fewer incidents or faster recovery, because compliance should support real security, not just paperwork. A framework that fits will make it easier to measure these outcomes because it defines control objectives, assessment methods, and governance routines. This measurement aspect matters because leadership will ask whether the investment is worth it, and the program needs to show value beyond passing audits. For beginners, the key idea is that compliance frameworks are tools for organizing security work, and tools are judged by whether they help you build and demonstrate capability. If the framework produces evidence but not protection, it is incomplete, and if it produces ideals but not evidence, it is fragile. Fit means supporting both. Evaluating and selecting compliance frameworks that fit business and regulation is a structured decision about how the organization will organize controls, evidence, and governance over time. You begin by clarifying the purpose of adopting a framework and mapping the regulatory and contractual obligations that shape evidence expectations. You evaluate business fit by considering size, maturity, speed of change, and operational realities, because frameworks that fight workflows create compliance fatigue and shortcuts. You choose a primary backbone framework that can be mapped to other obligations, reducing duplication and creating a consistent compliance language. You assess framework specificity, evidence requirements, and integration with existing processes so that the program can operate continuously rather than scrambling during audits. You also plan adoption realistically, staging implementation responsibly with clear ownership and measurable outcomes. When frameworks are selected with this discipline, they become practical structures that support both compliance and real risk reduction, strengthening trust with regulators and customers while keeping the organization operationally effective.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.